Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Another exciting day, another exciting show. Let me tell you what today's show is about. Yeah, this is my 1970 look, guys. So I know you see the boots, the bell bottoms, and all that kind of stuff. I'm feeling a little bit like John Travolta. But today's show, I think I can resonate with today's show. And I'm going to tell you the reason why. I'm the type of individual that I don't mind taking rest. I don't mind just jumping into some shit and then figuring it out as I'm in it. You find very few people like that. And the ones that you do find that's like that, they are really extraordinary individuals. They literally have that overall beast mindset. They're not afraid to take that chance, that leap. And sometimes you take the leap and it doesn't come out the way you want it. But you know what? They're not afraid to do it. And more importantly, they're analytical thinkers. They can think outside the box. When they're caught in a situation, well, what do I need to do? They don't resonate from a fear-based mindset. That's deep. You heard that from me. They don't register from a fear-based mindset. Today on the show, we have a young lady whose journey is the same. It's not from a fear mindset-based setting because if it was, she wouldn't have created the things that she has created. Today on the show, I'm pleased and proud to have Jeanne Collins on the show. Let me tell you a little bit about her before we get even deeper. She's the creator and the founder of the new podcast, The House of Jamar. And during the pre-interview, I was like, what does that mean? It sounds French. You know, I was about ready to look that up. I'm going to let her tell you about all that. And she's also the entrepreneur of the House of Jamar. And she's also the author of 2 Feet In. That scares the hell out of me because I'm always putting 2 feet in. But without further ado, we'd like to welcome to the show the beautiful Jeanne Collins. Welcome to the show, baby girl.
Hey, thank you, Andre. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet another fellow 2 feet inner. So good to talk to you. Let's go all in. I love it.
Oh, yeah, we're getting ready to go all in. So tell the viewers a little bit about Miss Collins before we dive into all of these things that you've accomplished by having 2 feet in.
That is such a big, broad question. Wow. Okay. Well, at a really high level, I'm 54 years old. I'm a single parent. I live in Connecticut. I made multiple career shifts after I turned 50. I got divorced when I was 6 months pregnant. People don't do that. That was my second marriage. First marriage, I married my mother, didn't know it was my mother. A lot of people do that one. And I wrote a book. A lot of people don't do that either. So I've done a lot of things. I have a mindset that, like you said, I think is a little bit unique. Mm-hmm. And I love to share what that is so that people can maybe learn from me and not make some of the mistakes I did and learn from the positives.
You mentioned something that I had no idea, and it wasn't on your paperwork. You married your mother.
Oh,
right. You got to take me down that part first.
That was my first wedding, and I bring that up because I think a lot of people fall into this trap. I got married the first time right before I turned 30 because everybody was getting married and it felt like that's what I was supposed to do. Like the clock was ticking and that's what I was supposed to be doing. And I didn't realize at the time, but my husband was exactly like my mother. And I actually don't speak to my mother right now, if that gives you any indication of what that relationship is like. And I didn't realize it until I realized it. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. And as soon as I saw that he was exactly like my mother, and how could I have done that? I was like, oh, this has got to end. I'm sorry, I'm out. Nice guy, but no, thank you.
What
A lot
what
of people make that mistake, though.
what was the flags? I mean, how long had you dated before you even considered marrying him? And I'm gonna put your words in here. Did you do all feet in, 2 feet in because everybody else was doing it? And then the other part was, how long did you date him before you got married to him?
Yeah, this is where you'll be like, you're crazy, girl. I dated him for 7 years and we owned a
Crazy
house
girl.
together. Yeah, exactly. I did exactly like I told you. Young and dumb. And that's why I love to tell my story because I'm like, you know what, if somebody else could learn from me and not do the same mistake. But I look at everything, like you say, you jump in and you do it without fear, and everything is a lesson. And I learned so much from that lesson about how to recognize who I was. And the reason why he was like my mother is he was one of those people that had this attitude that I will be happy when. I will be happy when this happens. I will be pleasant and joyful and feel successful when this happened. And I realized that I was in a state in my life where I had evolved enough with my mindset to be like, but we need to be happy now or
Right.
enjoy life now. If we're always just waiting for the win, I can't live life that way. And so I did evolve to get to be where I was, and he didn't evolve with me. He stayed in the I will be happy when. And that is my mother also.
How did he accept? Who bought the news? Who bought the bad news? Naturally, you
Me.
did. And what was that like? Do you remember how you bought it to him and what his
Yeah,
reaction was?
I did. I mean, I told him that I felt like he was like my mother and he was too negative, and that I had grown and I had evolved, and that we were looking at life very differently, and we had a different approach to life, and we didn't want the same things out of life. And he truly is a lovely person, was so gracious about it. He really was. He was very gracious. We had a very amicable divorce, and he was very nice about it because I think deep down he saw what I saw, which was we have a different view about what our future will look like, and he couldn't get himself to a more positive place about life. And I couldn't live with someone who wasn't going to be open to the possibilities of life. It just didn't align with who I was anymore or my mindset about it. I didn't want to live in a space of, I will be happy when I get this big job or when I get this promotion or when we can afford to redo the bathroom. That doesn't work. At least it didn't work for me.
Did you know you got married? You said 30 years old, right? Was it 30?
30 years, 29. Yeah.
Did you, our two-part question, did you have a career prior?
Yes.
What was
Mhm.
that career? And more importantly, at 30 years old, did you really know what you wanted, what you considered to be your life?
I think so. Very interesting questions. I had a career before. Yes. I had made a career shift. So I think that was part of it. I had been working in restaurant and catering and thought I wanted to work in restaurant management, and then shifted and decided I wanted to go get an MBA, and that I didn't want to pay what it was going to cost to get an MBA. So at the time, companies were paying for MBAs. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go get a job at a company that's going to pay for this MBA so I don't have to pay for this.
Mhm.
And so I went and I got a sales assistant job at a marketing company. And I think that was a big shift because that moved me into corporate America, and that moved me into sales, and that moved me into a career where if you really work hard and you try, you can move up and you can be very successful. And I was very dedicated to that path. And I think we were on different career paths. So that was part of the issue. Um, and I think having a taste of success and being around people who were successful, as I deemed success at that time, which was, they owned a house, they were married, they had kids, they drove nice cars, I lived in a nice town. And so to me, the job was going to lead to a level of success that I thought I wanted. And he wasn't aligned necessarily with working that hard to get to that path. And kind of wanted it to be handed to him. And I was like, I don't feel that that level of success gets handed to you. I think you do have to work for it, and you have to take some risks in order to get there.
You mentioned you saw your mom and your husband, but I'm trying to understand. You didn't recognize it until you got married. To me, it seemed like with your intelligence, your career path, and you being focused at 30 years old, that would have those flaws that he presented by being so strong in your mother to the point that you and your mom aren't talking. Could it be that maybe you went on with it to try to maybe change those character flaws that he had? Because
Oh, a
I don't,
100%.
yeah, because I don't see
Oh,
somebody just
yeah.
all of a sudden just
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because I bought into the mindset that he had that it will get better when he's passionate about his job. It'll get better when he's enjoying his career. And I really bought into that. And I really thought, you know what? He's right. When he's loving his job like I love my job, it will get better. And then it didn't. And I was like,
what
ooh.
was his job, Gene? What was his job?
So he had a couple different jobs. One of his jobs was he was working in finance and he absolutely hated it because he felt like if he worked in finance and was making money, then he would be happy, but he hated the job.
Mhm.
And he really wanted to be a chef and he was an incredibly talented chef, very talented. And he went back to school to become a chef and I fully supported that. And he was working in New York City at a restaurant and he hated his boss. So he quitted. So he quitted, not a right word, quit. And I just thought, if you like, you have to pay your dues. If you love being a chef, then you're going to do what you have to do to get to where you want to go. You don't quit just because you don't like your boss. You
Right.
find a better way. And so that's where I started to realize he loved cooking and he was in cooking, but yet that still didn't make him happy. When he was in finance, he wanted money, he was making money, but that still didn't make him happy. And then I started to see like maybe you're not going to find happiness out there because you can't find it inside.
Damn.
So it's a tough one, and I think as women, we want to think that we can help people grow and we want to think that we can fix people. It's a very common trait that many women have in relationships of, well, once they're with me, they'll change. and
What was you
and it
guys'
doesn't work
relationship?
that way.
What was you
Doesn't work that
guys'
way.
what was you guys' relationship outside of that? Like, were you attracted to him? Was he
Yeah.
attracted to you? I mean,
Yep.
but you
He
guys just
was
wasn't.
yeah, he was, except what ended up happening is when I started to work in corporate America and he was working in New York City in a restaurant, those two schedules do not align. And so I would have a completely different life. He'd be working every weekend. I'd be off on the weekends. He'd be working at night. I'd be working during the day. So I started to become friends with the neighbors and be friends with different people and friends with work and going out with friends with work. And everyone's like, so this husband, I've never met this husband. And I'm like,
Wow.
yeah.
Let's go back.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little
So
bit.
it's yeah, but I think a lot of young people fall into a similar trap, which is why I share it,
Mhm.
to try to shed some light onto it for people so that they might see the signs and the clues earlier than I had.
You mentioned your mom. What was your mom and your
Yeah.
dad like? What was your household like? Because to be at the point now that you're still not speaking to your mom, your first marriage reminded you of your mom. What was it like growing up for you in your house? Who was the dominant person in your house? Was it your mom or your dad? Or did you live in a household with both of your parents?
I did not live in a household with both my parents. My parents got divorced when I was 8. And it was my mother's choice to get divorced and to move us 2 hours away from my father. And my mother, still to this day, my parents have been divorced for 47 years now. And my mother still has a victim mentality about that. And I just have a really hard time with that. I'm like, not everything happens to you and you need to find the lessons and you need to move on and it's your life. And if you don't take control of your life, no one else will. But my mother still acts like the victim. However, she's the one who asked for the divorce. But her getting divorced was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because it made us move to a very affluent town. So I was fortunate enough to have a really high level public school education, which was fantastic. And that has led to a lot of my success because I got a really good education. And my relationship with my mom while I was growing up was decent. I saw my dad every other weekend, and it was just a different time when we were raised younger. We didn't have cell phones and FaceTime and all of that.
Mm.
But as I got older and started to become an adult, I really started to build a relationship with my father and my stepmother. So that would be the Jerry and the Mary, which make up the Germar. So Jerry, J-E-R, and Mary, M-A-R. It's the first three letters of their names, because they really became my foundational parents. And my stepmother really became a very influential mother and role model and just a friend for me. And so my relationship with my father as an adult is incredible. And my father lives very close to me, and I see him all the time. And we have an incredible relationship, which I'm so fortunate for. But my mother is still living in the victim mentality. And so, therefore, I've made the choice to keep my mother pretty much on the outskirts of my life. I see her a couple times over the year for the benefit of my daughter. But otherwise, I keep her on the outside of my life because that is better for me.
There's always two versions when a situation like that occurs in the household with a mother and a father, and as it relates to the children. What's your dad's viewpoint of your feelings towards your mom and the victimization that she's claiming, and how did that strengthen? Because there had to be a moment of you guys' separation, or you see them every weekend, that you wasn't able to really express what was going on. But now that you're older, what's the relationship with that little bit of information about your mom and you, and now the gravitation to a more closeness with your stepmom and your dad?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. My father has had to grow and change and evolve a lot. And I think he's a different person now than he was when he was married to my mother. And part of that is it's a different generation and a different time. And when he was married to my mother, and that was the early 70s, he wasn't around much. And my mother's correct. He wasn't around much. It was his job to go out and work and come home and come home to the house that the wife was in. And so he wasn't very involved in our childhood until we got older. And I think my stepmother helped my father see the beauty in being a parent and getting to experience those things. And I think my father's a very different person now than he was when I was little. And now, as a grandparent, there is no better grandparent than my father, quite honestly. So I think he's made up for what he wasn't as I was younger and growing up. He's made up for now that he's older, because he's changed and evolved. And he's always very kind to my mother, and he never says anything really mean about my mother. He doesn't understand why my mother is the way she is still, and why my mother still treats me the way she treats me. So my mom is very negative to me and not very supportive. And so he doesn't understand that. But but he also respects my decision to not have her in my life as well.
How does that make you feel? I mean, that's pretty deep, because just by
Yeah.
the tone of your voice, I can feel the energy here that you want something with your mom, but you don't know how to repair the situation that she's dealing with. How difficult is that for you to struggle with the two?
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I think it was very difficult for a lot of years. So this decision did not happen overnight. This is a lot of years in the making, decades in the making, to be honest, and decades of experiences and incidences and things that my mother has done to myself and to my sister as well. So it doesn't happen overnight. And I think the process, quite honestly, of writing my book, of writing 2 Feet In, forced me to shed a lot of light for myself and do a lot of inner reflecting about my relationship with my mother. And I think a lot of times we maintain relationships with family members, especially our parents, because we believe we need to, because they're our parents. And I think I finally got to the point of saying, it is my life and I need to protect my emotional stability. And I was able to see how upset I would become at how my mother would treat me and how that negative impact would last for days. I'd get one text messages, and for days I would be upset by how she treated me. And I just decided I can make the choice to not have that part of my daily life anymore. And so I decided to do that. And it wasn't without many conversations with my mother. It was. And we had many conversations and we talked about many things and many ways to repair it. And she doesn't have the capacity to do those things. So since she isn't willing to or can't, it's better for me that she stays on the outside of my life. And it is tough and it's sad, but at the same time, it coming to that decision did not happen overnight. Like I said, this is years in the making, decades. And coming to that place is actually very peaceful.
Hmm.
Because when you are at a place that someone is causing you pain and you wish they were dead, that's a really shitty place to be too. And
Wow.
so you have to, yeah, because you want that pain to stop and you want the way that they're treating you to stop. And that's a pretty shitty place to be too. And, but I am not like my mother in that I won't accept that victim mentality of my life. This is what I've been dealt with, but I have the ability to respond to it in a way that's healthy for me and for my relationships, for the people that are part of my life every day as well. And my daughter's included in that.
Speaking of your daughter,
Yeah.
you a single mom, and
Yeah.
you know firsthand two different type of female um, compatibility. You have a
Correct.
mom, biological, and you have a brand new stepmom. One is toxic, but she's still blood. I get what
Right.
you're saying. Sometimes you have to cut the cord of someone that emotionally is unhealthy for you.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're a mom.
Yeah.
What do you bring different to your daughter now? What aspects of both of their lives? Because the reason I say both of their lives, because a lot of people, when they hear you say cut the ties from somebody, it's not that easy because you still have her genetic makeup, no matter how you want to look at it. But it doesn't mean you have to take on her characteristics moving forward.
Correct.
So, what do you bring into as a single mom? What do you bring to this little girl's life that's different to make it better?
Yeah. So that was also part of the journey of writing the book. Was really spending time reflecting on the positives and the positive gifts that my mother did give us in our upbringing, and of which there are many, quite honestly. And I do talk about those in my book. And I think writing the book forced me to have to really recognize those and label those and acknowledge those. And so my mother was incredibly independent. She went out and got an MBA long before women did, and she had a really great career for a really long time and worked very hard. And so I learned a lot of that independence. My mom was also very inclusive of everyone at a time in the 70s and 80s when people weren't as inclusive. Everyone, race, color, religion, it doesn't matter. Everyone is one person. And so I learned a lot of really good things from my mom about that, about being very driven. And so I think my daughter sees that in me.
Mhm.
But then from my stepmother, I learned how to love from my stepmother, and I learned how to have emotion and how to say I love you. Neither my parents, my mother or my father, never told me they loved me until I was in my 30s, and then it came out
Oh
weird
my
because I'd never
God.
heard it before. I'd never heard it before, and when they say it, it's like it's really awkward because you're like, all of a sudden you love me now at 35? Like,
Hey,
really? Okay.
hey,
Like,
Gene, I'm gonna share a story. That's so funny you said that because I remember the first time I heard that from my father. I was in my 30s and it was a cold winter day. I was on my way to Cincinnati and I stopped by his house and um and I remember going in the house and I was telling him I'm getting ready to move to Cincinnati because I got a job offer as a teacher there. And as I was walking out the door, he said, "Bye, son. I love you." And I almost fell on the fucking ice.
you're like, wait, who's talking to me?
I literally turned around and I asked my friend, I said, "Did you hear what he said?" And it was shocking to her, but I had to tell her kind of like what you said. I said, "He's never said that."
Hmm. Yeah.
And it was shocking her because I guess that word is common and with them, but it wasn't coming from me. And I didn't even though I love to hear that, I didn't even know how to resonate it because this was something at 30 years old, you just now saying.
Right. Yeah.
That, that's crazy.
Uh-huh.
But my
It
question,
is. And it's,
my,
Yeah, but then
How
you
did you deal with
learn
that? How did you deal with that?
you learn I think because of my stepmother, she really taught me how to love and how to feel and how to be a different type of person. And so
Hmm.
she was very spiritual and she was also religious, but she was even more importantly very spiritual. And she was always positive. And she passed away of cancer 7 years ago. And even at the darkest of days for her, when she was so sick, and you would call her, and she would always say, like, I'm like, how are you? She's like, I'm alive. I'm peachy keen. I'm great. And I was like, how can you be? You're throwing up. You don't have any hair. You're so sick. Like, but her approach to life was always just one of gratitude
Hmm.
and one of kindness. And so I think I learned so much from her about that. And that I have carried to my role as a parent so much more, just in terms of being supportive of my daughter, supporting her dreams, supporting her being different. You know, my daughter wants to dance on Broadway. That is not a typical 18-year-old. They're off at college. My daughter is off at performing arts school in New York City, living by herself in Harlem. And I love it. And she's so happy because she's found her place and her purpose. And she's so comfortable with who she is. And she's the most incredible human being. And it makes me so proud that I've been able to take the positives from my mother and the incredible positives from my stepmother and integrate them into myself to come up with my own way of being a mother that really works for me and works for my daughter and her personality as well, because every child is different too.
How do you bring the dysfunction behavior of your biological mom into your daughter's life? That's still her grandmother. How do you how do
I
how do
don't
you
be
allow
I
that?
don't be you know I don't, because the reality is my mother never wanted to be a mother. And my mother, has communicated that to my sister. She didn't want, she even told her, I didn't want you. I didn't want another child. I didn't want to be a mother. And that is some deep stuff to carry on as a person. And so my mother was pretty absent for my daughter's upbringing, even though she lived 15 minutes away from us. She was really pretty absent because she really didn't enjoy being a grandmother, and it makes her very uncomfortable. It's not something that brings her joy. So she was not incredibly involved with my daughter's upbringing. And then as my daughter started to get older and was old enough to understand some of that dynamic, I was able to explain to my daughter some of it. And she sees it when she interacts with my mom. She sees it, she understands it. And until my stepmother passed away, she had the most incredible relationship with my stepmother as a grandmother. And so I feel like she was given that gift of that relationship and able to see, what a great grandmother can be. And she just is kind of, the other grandmother is just, she's just different as how we look at it.
That's a powerful statement to find out that your biological never wanted to be a mom.
Yeah, it's a
Like,
tough one.
yeah, like did did she share with you guys or to your father why she would make such a statement? Did something happen in her upbringing that made her feel like that?
It did. I mean, so her sister was 13 years older than her. So she's the oops baby, and her parents didn't want her either. And to her defense, she is a reflection of how she was raised. And she is, and the way she parented and the way that she is definitely a reflection of her parents and how she was raised. However, I'm a firm believer that you can't use that as an excuse for bad behavior in your own life. You have the choice to decide the type of person that you're going to be. You don't have to be shaped by your parents. You can choose a different path if you want to. And that is your right and your choice to do that, because it is your life. And to just always blame everything on, well, I am this way because my parents made me this way, it feels like a cop out to me, in my opinion, because I've just seen a lot of people go through a lot of tough times and a lot of shit and a lot of abuse. And they manage to come out and do a lot of good and are good people helping other people do good. And so I don't feel that it has to continue. It doesn't have to. You can
But
live a different life. You don't have to be branded by it.
but if you only know one way and opportunities don't present themselves, she may not have had another option. There may not have been opportunities. I'm not trying to justify her, but what I'm saying is I get it. Yeah, I think when opportunities are there, you have the ability to change. But then I think on the flip side, because of how she was raised in an environment, maybe the environment that what she grew up in didn't have opportunities for her. Maybe what was presented in front of her was clearly deeply embedded, so deep that maybe when opportunities actually came, even if they were in front of her, she wasn't able to gravitate to those things.
Yeah, that is partially true. Yeah. However, I would say on the flip side to that, my mother is incredibly intelligent. My mom is a very smart woman who had a lot of financial success in her career and worked really hard. My mom is no dummy, and my mom is very cultured and very experienced and very exposed to a lot of things. And so I think as her adult life evolved, especially after she got divorced and we moved to Connecticut, I think she had opportunities. I think she really did. I think she's had opportunities to have different relationships. She's
Mhm.
had opportunities to get therapy or to read or to want to approach relationships differently to get a different outcome. And she's been told to do these things. She's been told to go to therapy. It's been suggested to her from her medical professionals. And she just has this attitude that I know better than them and they have nothing to teach me. And I struggle with that. I come from a mentality of we always need to be continually learning. I don't care what it is. Like there's always something we can learn. Like we're not done. Like when are we done learning? When are we done growing? We're never. And my mom's mentality is sort of just there's nothing that any of these people, whether it be books or coaches or therapies or programs, can teach her because
It's
she knows everything already. And that's tough.
let's
It
go
just
down.
doesn't align with how I live my life. I'm like 2 feet in doesn't align with that. I'm sorry. Like 4 career changes after 50 doesn't align with that. Like I'm all about continual learning and learning new things and growing and meeting new people and trying new things and new challenges. And it's a journey. We're not a destination.
Let's talk about these different career changes. Why so many different career
Yeah.
changes for you?
Yeah. So I was a vice president of sales for 22 years. I worked in advertising sales and ran a sales team for a public company. And then in January of 2020, I got fired from my job. And I kind of at that time defined myself by being a single mom and a vice president of sales because I worked so hard. And when you work for a public company and run the largest sales team for that company, you really report to Wall Street. And it's a special kind of job with a special kind of pressure. And I was also the only girl in the boys club as well. So while I loved my team, I had lost my passion for that industry. And so when I got fired, it was the greatest gift I could have been given because I was really forced to have to look at my life and say, I'm going to work another 20 years. I'm a single mom. I got 20 more years of working here. What am I going to do to love it? And I want to make a difference and I want to feel purposeful and I want to have passion and I want to love what I do.
Mm.
And that forced me to take a huge risk and decide the one thing I had a passion for was interior design. So I decided to start my own interior design firm with no background in being an entrepreneur and no background in interior design. And so I went back to school and I did 2 programs online consecutively to get a degree. And I launched my company 5 months after I got fired. And I'm proud to say that now I'm an award winning interior designer and I was nominated for HGTV Designer of the Year and on and on and on. But that put me on a very different path of becoming an entrepreneur. And that path and making that mindset shift for myself that my life was really important and that was what I was going to focus on was my life more than my work and all my decisions were going to go through the lens of life work balance, not work life balance.
Mhm.
And when I made that, it changed everything. It's changed everything that I do, everything that I am, everything that I focus on, the people that I attract into my life, how I live my life. It's changed everything. And that has snowballed. One thing leads to the next. You do that. I write a book, then I start speaking, then I start writing articles. I start being guests on podcasts. I was on 65 podcasts in 4 months. And then I decided I love meeting people. I'll launch a podcast of my own. And then I decided I really love coaching and I'll go get a mindset certification to be a mindset coach and I'll launch coaching programs. And it just sort of evolves, all because of things that I'm just really interested and passionate about.
Mhm.
And opportunities just kind of open themselves and unfold when you're open to what those might be if you're doing it from a place of purpose.
You said I hear this word so much, mindset coaching. What's your definition of a mindset coach? I mean, we hear it,
Hmm.
it's like
Yeah,
every one in third individuals you meet classify themselves as a mindset coach. With what
sure.
you've been through and what you've evolved into, why a mindset coach for you? What makes you different than the thousands who claim to have who hold that title?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think really the benefit of a mindset coach is what's their life experience that they bring to the table. Because mindset is pretty simple. It's really how do you look at things and how do you view things and what lens do you look at them through? And so the role of a coach is to guide people towards looking at things potentially differently that makes them feel more aligned and more in flow with their life. And so that's the role of a coach. I think when it comes to a mindset coach, a lot of it is what is my experience? And so I specialize in helping people who are like the person I used to be. We are best suited to help who we used to be. And so I specialize in helping women who are executives, who are overworked, who want more balance, but they don't know how to find it. And so my role is to help them uncover what does balance look like for them and what changes do they need to make and how do they need to change some of the inner narrative that they have with themselves to make themselves a little bit more of a priority or to put up more boundaries to have more of that balance. And so I attract people that are like I was, who can really benefit from not just my approach to coaching, but also the experience I can bring to the table because I know what it's like to be that overworked executive. I was that person sitting at the boardroom. I get it. I
Why do
understand.
you mentioned the Good Boys Club? Why do you think they fired
Yeah.
you really? Because you seem to be a well
Yeah.
driven individual. So I'm not,
Yeah.
if you're reporting to Wall Street, that's a whole
Hmm.
different ball game. This means you
It
in a
is.
whole different category when it comes to advertising, period. I don't
Correct.
see why somebody will let you go bringing that to the table unless they were probably intimidated with you and you being a woman. What's your take on that? Why do you think
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah. So they wanted to make a whole bunch of it was kind of a 2 year lead up to that, quite honestly, of making a bunch of cultural changes. And I was very fortunate that I always sort of ran my team as a little micro universe of our corporation. And my team always had a culture that was a little bit different from the rest of the company. Very respectful, very inclusive. People didn't quit. I would only fire people if they were really doing a terrible job, or I was forced to fire them because they wanted turnover. And so they were starting to have a different mindset of a lot of disruption and seeking a lot of disruption and a culture that was very aggressive. And we were butting heads a lot about the change in the corporate culture and about how unhappy so many people were with the change in the corporate culture. And they tried to make a couple changes to get that. But I think I chose to be very vocal about the fact that I didn't think that culture change was a good idea and that a lot of people were really upset and unhappy about it. And they hired an agency to come in. And, I was really honest with my assessment. And I even said to them, I said, I will probably get fired by expressing my opinion about this because it's not going to align with the others. But this is the type of leader that I am. And this is how I value my team and my people. And this is how I treat my people. So if I get fired because I believe in a different culture, then so be it. And a year later they did a restructure, and I knew because I was part of designing the restructure, and I thought there's just no way they're going to pay me what they pay me to do half the job. You get to a point where you're making so much money, it's your risk of getting fired is that much greater. At the top, they can hire one and a half people at half the price. So I knew it was coming. I had hoped it wouldn't be coming at that time, but I was not surprised. I was surprised at how it happened. I was fired over Zoom, and my boss never even turned on his camera. So that's a little rough after being there for 11 years. That's tough, but actually getting fired didn't surprise me because I felt like I was just on a different path as a leader than where they were.
You did 2 feet in.
Yeah,
You get cowardly let go of. Let's call it what it is, cowardly.
yeah, special.
How much what should a person get out of the book as it relates to these different path structures that happen into your life, from marrying your mom, dealing with the issues that your mom had, be reintroduced to your dad and a new stepmom, the loss of it, a daughter, divorce, cowardly let go of, not hearing your ideas be implemented in what we might call the ideal life, the great job, the whole 9 yards. Now everything is different. How much of this is resonated in this book, and why should individuals gravitate to 2 feet in concept?
Yeah. Because I think you will never know what's possible unless you're willing to try.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people get stuck because of the chatter that happens in their brain, which is all the doubt. And we all have self doubt. Our mind talks to us all day long in a negative way. If you actually pay attention to us, it's talking loudly and more oftenly in a more negative way than in a positive way. And so I think I have had the ability to quiet my mind and make decisions and not doubt myself after I make them and make rational, logical decisions. But then once I make them, I go all in. And the outcome might not work out the way I think it's going to. I don't ever know. And so I sort of let go of the destination and I hold on to the journey.
Mm.
And you can see that throughout my book. My book is sort of like romance novel meets self help meets entrepreneur, because there's a whole lot in there about lots of different relationships. And the things that I've learned from those choices, whether it be professional relationships, personal relationships, romantic relationships, relationships with parents, and relationships with friends also. I had to let go and lose a lot of friends when I got fired, and that was a tough journey also. Um, but I have lots of new friends. And so I think the thing that people can take away from my story is, people don't take risks because they're so afraid and fearful of the outcome, but let go of the outcome. Take a risk because it feels like it might lead you to a place that feels more purposeful and more aligned with the life that you want to live, and then follow that path. And maybe, you start a new job and maybe 6 months later, that's not the right job for you, but that's okay. Maybe another job opens up, but you never would have gotten that second job had you not left the first one and taken the stepping stone into it. And I look at my relationships like that, my marriage like that. I wouldn't have my daughter if I wasn't married to my second husband. And that's just the greatest gift ever. And I wouldn't have this whole career that I have now if I hadn't been fired. And I wouldn't trade my life right now for anything. It's amazing. And I'm so blessed. So
What are the
that's kind of
three?
a lesson.
What would be three? What would be 3 lessons that you will have people to undergo and trying to understand the process of putting 2 feet in their life?
Yeah. So the first one is really evaluating the foundation of your life and looking at your life through the lens like you would of building a house. And looking at your life in 3 different buckets. One is relationships, one is health, and one is career. And if you have cracks in your foundation in any one of those, if you don't figure out what the crack in the foundation is and address that, the rest of it is you're just trying to solve symptoms. You're not actually solving the problem. And
Mm.
I'll use career as an example. If people say, I really don't like my boss. Okay, let's take a peel back. Do you like being an accountant? Let's say you're do you like being an accountant? Yes, I really love being an accountant. Okay, so being in accounting is a good thing for you. What you don't like is some of the framing around your job, which might be the company that you work for, the culture that you work for, the boss that you have, the team that you manage, the hours, all these other things. But if you genuinely love being an accountant, then your foundation of being an accountant is great. And I think a lot of times when you force people to really look at some of this stuff, they're like, not only do I not like my boss, but I don't know that I like the work. Okay, well, that's a whole different story.
Right, right.
That's a different story, right? And same thing with relationships. It's like, I don't like how I feel. Okay, well, what about how you feel do you not like? And recognizing what that is. So that's the first step, is really taking a deep dive and asking yourself some really tough questions and just be really honest with yourself. And the second thing is how you go about doing that. And my suggestion to everyone is always to journal, because if you let go of the thought process and you just start free flowing and writing, it's amazing what happens, and your body can sort of take over that process and you can stop thinking about it. And if you just start writing how you feel, how do you feel today? How do you feel today? How do you feel about that job? What bothers you? What pisses you off? What excites you? What are you passionate about? And then you go back and you start to read days of that, it will become clear to you Is it a foundational thing? Where are you going? How do you feel? It will start to surface.
Hmm.
And then I always encourage people to find like minded people. And that might be connecting with someone on Instagram. That might be reaching out on a mom's group. That might be inviting a neighbor for coffee. Go out on a limb and invite someone to coffee that you think might be able to help you in your path. And don't be afraid to ask for help because you never know what doors might open if you explain and you ask for help and you put yourself out there to explain what you're going through. Because then you'll hear other people's stories, or they know a friend, or they know someone, or like you just have to be willing to put yourself out just a little bit and find some support wherever you can find that. And that's how you start that journey.
Mm. What's your life like now? Sounds like you got everything pretty much. Sound like you
Uh,
both feet in, and
I got both feet
you come out smelling like roses. What's your life like now?
my life is incredibly busy. I will say there's no lack. I have some friends that have a hard time hanging out with me because they're like, your ambition is just too high. You're doing too many things. I can't even, it gives me anxiety. I can't even, but that's how I'm wired. That's just how I am. I'm wired that way. Right. So I do have a lot of things going on, but I love all of them. And I truly love my interior design business. I really am focusing on only one or two clients a year, really trying to get out of construction because that gives me a lot of anxiety, but really realizing what things I love. And I'm really passionate from a design perspective and trying to find clients who are like-minded. I love speaking. I'm working on a TEDx talk right now. I love my podcast, as you know, from doing this, like the gift of getting to meet other people and having a platform to share their stories is truly really special. And I do really love that. And coaching is really great too. So they're all different. So I'm really busy. However, I do have a lot of boundaries. And so personal wellness is very important to me. My morning routine is super important to me. I don't start work before 10. And that's really important to me, and that I can get up and I can have my tea and I can journal and I can meditate and I can exercise. And I very rarely sway from that unless I have to for a contractor. And so trying to make sure I have that balance. My daughter lives in New York City now, so she lives about an hour away. I make sure I get in to see her every 2 weeks. I have a boyfriend, so I make sure that I make time for that relationship. And it's really recognizing that I have to have balance because I could go, 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 go from a career perspective, but I have to reel it in and I have to do things in steps and stages. Otherwise, I will go back to that work comes first and life comes second. And I have to kind of check myself. So, but I'm always learning and I'm always growing because it's a process, man. That there's, we all have garbage from our past. So it's still a work in progress. So don't ever think that I'm done, but I've accomplished a lot in 4.5 years.
How can the viewers reach out to you and follow you on social media, and more importantly, get to hear the podcast House of Jamar and get at least a copy of your book as well, 2 Feet In? How can the viewers get all that information?
Yeah, so it's all on my website. So houseofjermar.com. So it's house, House of Jermar, Jermar.com. My podcast is linked there. You can also search for the podcast anywhere you get podcast content, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere it's available. I put out new episodes every Thursday. My book is available on my website. It's available Amazon, anywhere you would get it. It's available in all formats. The audio version even exists if you want to listen to me for 5.5 hours. It's somewhat therapeutic. Um, and then on Instagram, I'm super active on Instagram. And so it's at House of Jermar. So House of Jermar, Jermar. And I post every day. So I would love to hear from people. I tell people all the time, DM me, connect, sign up for my newsletter. I do send out a newsletter every month about wellness, sometimes twice a month. So just connect and reach out and be part of the community. And I manage all my own social media. I manage all my own newsletter. I do all my own marketing. So you actually will hear from me.
Sounds like a winner. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And I'm proud of you. Everything that you've put your 2 feet in, you managed to come out smelling like a rose. Make sure that you subscribe, like, share, and follow. Let's learn to support each other. That's the first part of my 2 steps, is making sure you support each other's journey. You may not understand it, but at least take the time to sit back and at least listen and put yourself in that position. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.